I reside in a quaint provincial town. I used to run my own business. I specialized in car repairs. Business was booming, and my wife was both intelligent and gorgeous. But then, out of the blue, everything took a sharp turn. My wife and I go way back to our youth, hanging out with the same crowd. She was always the life of the party. Skipped university, worked at a furniture store by day, and hit the clubs by night. Her social circle was as extensive as a fishing net, and she made new friends without batting an eyelid. Let me tell you that she was constantly getting into some kind of trouble. One fateful evening, after drinking too much, she got behind the wheel, lost control, crashed into a guardrail, and eventually broke her leg in 2 places. Her so-called friends disappeared into thin air. No one wanted to deal with a broken car and a broken leg. But somehow I stayed close, and pretty soon we started living together. As her leg healed, Stella began to change in a way I had not expected at all. All her companions and acquaintances seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving just a couple of friends with whom she shared the occasional coffee break during lunch. The apartment transformed into an inviting haven, and returning home after a day's work greeted her with the mouth-watering aroma of a sumptuous dinner. My heart felt at ease and unburdened. I devoted myself to work, sometimes even burning the midnight oil, and earned quite well. The wedding unfolded in the finest restaurant, and everything was nothing short of spectacular. However, after a few months, the novelty wore off for my spouse, and she began to express her discontent. She would stay at home all day, while my workload increased even more. At that point, I was in high demand, raking in a substantial income by our city's standards. We splurged on a new car from the dealership, secured an apartment in the bustling centre, and dined at excellent eateries. Yet Stella continually accused me of neglecting her, which led to frequent arguments between us. I proposed that she take up employment to fill her time and widen her circle of friends. She was in favour of the notion. Although she feigned job hunting, truthfully, her heart wasn't in it. Some days she struggled to rise early, other days she begrudgingly went to work, and then there were the moments she claimed her co-workers were nothing but backstabbers. Eventually, we reached a consensus to get her a dog. And so we did. Wherever our pooch ventured, be it the pet grooming spa, frantic visits to the vet, or obedience classes, he invariably stole the show. Undeniably, the dog was a stunner, groomed to perfection, courteous, and apparently far wiser than his owner. One fall season, my wife became unwell and had to stay in the hospital. This meant I was left to tackle all the chores myself. Getting up early to take the dog out was quite challenging. I even attempted to convince Jack to handle his own business, but every effort I made just didn't pan out. Then one morning, the dog decided to do his thing and suddenly yanked me towards the neighbouring house. He strolled right into the building, dashed up to the 4th floor, and plopped down in front of a door I didn't recognize. When I rang the doorbell, a young fellow answered. Jack burst into a cheerful bark, radiating the joy of friendship with his whole appearance. However, the young man got scared and started shouting at us to leave, threatening to call the police if we didn't. It was a rather strange scenario, but the poor puppy was really bored, and his behaviour was completely abnormal. He kept pulling on the leash and running away during our walks. To keep the little rascal safe, I even bought a collar equipped with a GPS tracker, just to be sure that I could quickly find him if he decided to leave again. When Stella came out of the hospital, I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that life would return to normal, but this was far from the truth. One afternoon, Stella returned from a walk tearful and upset, complaining that our dog had run away. I remembered the GPS collar and reassured her, "Don't worry, we'll track it. Just give me the coordinates." Fortunately, the puppy was found quickly, and the atmosphere was relieved, but while studying the history of the route, I noticed something disturbing. 3 times a week, during their morning walks, they stayed in the same place for a long time. An uneasy feeling came over me. Curious, I typed the address on the map and found that it was the same house where Jack had once taken me for a walk. Suddenly it dawned on me that not only the dog went out for these morning walks, but also Stella, who accompanied a young neighbour. Without a moment's hesitation, I decided to confront her. I couldn't remain silent any longer. I laid everything bare. She fell apart, pleading for my forgiveness, curling up at my feet and wailing that she would rather end her life than face the consequences. But by then, my mind was made up. I gathered her suitcase, took her by the hand, and led her to that all too familiar address. I rang the doorbell. As the door swung open, the young man from before stood there, confusion written across his face. His initial shock was palpable as he saw Stella beside me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What's going on?" he stammered, glancing nervously between us. "This is where you've been going all those mornings, isn't it?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the storm brewing within me. "You've betrayed my trust, Stella. You've betrayed our marriage." The young man shifted awkwardly, clearly unsure whether to stay or back away. Stella's sobs intensified as she stepped forward, seeking solace in the familiarity of his presence. "Please, Liam, it wasn't what you think. I was just lonely." "Lonely?" I echoed, incredulity lacing my tone. "You chose to confide in him instead of me. I worked day and night to build a life for us, and you threw it all away for someone who can't even stand up to you." She shook her head, desperation colouring her words. "No, it wasn't like that. I was just lost. I thought I could find a piece of myself again." I felt a pang of empathy but quickly buried it beneath my anger. "And did you find it? Did you find the woman I fell in love with?" Before she could answer, the young man stepped in. "Maybe you should all just sit down and talk about this." I shot him a glare that silenced him instantly. "You're not part of this conversation." My gaze returned to Stella, her eyes pleading, reflecting a mix of regret and fear. After a long moment, I took a deep breath, trying to quell the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "Stella, I want you to be honest. What do you want? Do you want to stay with me, or do you want to explore this, whatever it is with him?" As we walked away from the house, I realized that no matter how low we have fallen, there was no turning back. The divorce was quick. I've regretted it for a while, but life is moving inexorably forward.